Yeah. Good evening, everyone. In the last session, we started discussing about Springboot. So, what is Springboot? Springboot is one approach to develop Spring-based applications with less configuration. Spring framework is already available. As an extension for the Spring framework, we got the Springboot. So by using Springboot, we can easily develop our application. What type of applications we can create by using Spring? Same type of applications can be created by using Spring Boot also. Standalone applications we can create, web applications we can create, and distributed applications also we can create by using Spring Boot. When we compare Spring and Spring Boot, there are several advantages with the Spring Boot. First one is starter form. Second one, auto configuration. Third one, actuators. Fourth one, embedded server. Starter forms. What are the dependencies that we are configuring? Those dependencies configuration simplified with this starter form. So there are several starter forms available in the Spring Boot. Based on the starter form, we are getting auto configuration. So can you tell me what is auto configuration? What is auto configuration? Spring Boot is going to identify the configuration that is required for our application. So example, connection pool will be created. Application deployment will happen in the server. IOC container will be started. Component scanning will happen. All these are auto configuration benefits that we are getting. How Spring Boot will understand I need a connection pool, I need server, I need security based on the starters we are adding. Boot will understand the configuration required for the application and it will provide that configuration for our application. And the next one we are having actuators. What is the meaning of actuators? Actuators are used to monitor and manage our application. And the embedded server. What is embedded server? It provides the server to run our application. By default, we are getting Apache Tomcat as a embedded server. We can say that it is a default embedded container. Jetty, Netty also available. We can change from one embedded server to another embedded server. Then how to create the boot application? There are two ways to create the boot application. What are the two ways to create the boot application? One is by using initializer website. Second one is by using IDE. Even if you use IDE, internally it will connect with the initializer website. So internet connection is mandatory to create our Spring Boot application. Now, today we need to understand one important concept in the Spring Boot, that is start class. What is start class in Spring Boot? When we create boot application, by default, one Java class will be created with a name called application.java. That class looks like this: public class application. In that class, we will have a main method, public static void main, string arguments will be available, and here it will call one method internally, that is Spring application dot run method, application dot class comma args, and this class will have a annotation called @Spring Boot application annotation. When we create a Spring Boot application, by default, this Java class will be created. This Java class is called as start class in the Spring Boot. What is the start class in the Spring Boot? Start class is entry point for boot application execution. When you run Spring Boot application, the application execution will start from the start class. Start class is also called as main class in the Spring Boot. Start class is also called as main class in Spring Boot. So Spring Boot application should contain only one start class. Sir, Can I create multiple start classes in the Spring Boot? No, we should not create multiple start classes. Always we need to create only one start class. But really, am I creating that start class? It is coming along with the project creation. It is coming along with the project creation. When we create boot application, when we create boot project, when we create boot app, start class will create by default. Start class will create by default. We no need to create that. Now, if you see in the start class, mainly we need to understand what is this annotation. Okay, guys. And what is this run method? If you understand this annotation and this run method, then we are good with the start class in the Spring Boot. Clear? Now, first thing is @Spring Boot application. Sir, can I run my Spring Boot application without using this annotation? Now, remove this REST controller, remove this method also. I don't need this. Yep. So this is the start class which we are getting. Observe. Public class application. It is having a main method. Inside the main method, application.run method is available, and it is having @Spring Boot application. And here I am having report service. Can I say report service is a Spring Bean? How can I say it is a Spring Bean? Because it is having @service annotation. Run this project, right click, run as boot application. When I run this project, you can see object is created for my report service, or object is not created for report service. Object is created. Constructor is executed. So we can say object is created. Am I writing any configuration? Am I specifying to perform the component scan? No, I'm not specifying to perform the component scanning. I'm not writing the configuration class. Am I creating IOC container? No, everything is happened with the Spring Boot. Now here, this annotation, @Spring Boot application, annotation is available. If you open this annotation, you can see Spring Boot configuration, enable auto configuration, and the component scan. So here, you no need to specify component scan annotation in the Spring Boot. If you write this one annotation is equal to below 3 annotations. One is @Spring Boot configuration. @Spring Boot configuration is equal to @configuration in the Spring. Okay. In the Spring project, we use it to create a class with @configuration. But now in the Spring Boot, can I consider start class is a configuration class? Can I consider start class is a configuration class? Yes. How it is becoming a configuration class? Because of this annotation. That one annotation is equal to 3 annotations. Right. Here, the Spring Boot application annotation is equal to below 3 annotations. What is the first one? @boot configuration. And the second one, enable auto configuration. What is auto configuration? Identify what starters are available. Based on the starter, what configuration is required, it will provide that configuration also. And the third one, this annotation is also having @component scan. What is a component scan? What is a component scan? Component scanning is used to identify the Spring Bean classes available in the project. Okay. Now here in the Spring, I created a configuration class and I have given configuration annotation, component scan annotation. See here, if we go to our project, Bean Lifecycle app or whatever it is, here I created app config class. I have given configuration and I have given component scan. When it go to boot class, do I need to write that or I no need to write that? No need to write that because those are common for every project. Spring Boot provided one single annotation called @boot application. That one annotation is equal to how many annotations? 3 annotations. What are those 3? @boot configuration, @enable auto configuration, @component scan. Now, here in the boot application, in which package our start class is available, that package will be considered as a base package. That will be considered as a base package. So now, as it is considered as a base package, first it will go to that package. We'll check, is there any Spring Bean class available? Not available. Then go for other package. So report service, is it following the base package? Yes. So this class will be scanned, or this class will not be scanned. This class will be scanned. Right click, run as a boot application. Now you see my start class is executed. It considered as a configuration class, and it performed component scanning, and it will perform auto configuration also. Now tell me, to run my Spring Boot application, should I mean, this annotation is a mandatory or that annotation is optional? If I remove that annotation, can I run this program? I can run, but what happened? What happened? Application is failed to start. So for every Spring Boot application, this annotation will be available. So if you are writing this annotation, that means you are writing these 3 annotation. Can I call it is a less configuration approach? Instead of writing 3 annotations, I'm writing only 1 annotation. That class will become configuration class. That class is performing component scanning, and that class is performing auto configuration also. Tell me, what is a Spring Boot and what is the start class in the Spring Boot? Earlier, we developed our project by using Spring Framework. So we developed our project by using Spring Framework. What are the problems we faced with the Spring Framework? Boilerplate configuration. In several projects, we need to write the same configuration, create the XML file, configure the class as a Spring Bean, start the IOC container, create the configuration class, perform the component scanning. All these things are common in every project. To avoid the common problems of the projects, Spring people released Spring Boot into the market. Can I say Spring Boot is a replacement for the Spring? Why not? Spring Boot is not replacement for the Spring. Spring Boot is extension for the Spring, right? So here I'm creating my boot application. When I create my boot application, one Java class is created by default. That Java class is called as start class. In the interview, they will ask a question. What is the start class in the Spring Boot? Come on. I'm asking a question. What is the start class in the Spring Boot? Spring Boot start class is the main class of the application. That class is called as entry point for our application. Whether you create a standalone project, or you create a web application, or you create a REST API, or you create a web service, any type of application you develop by using Spring Boot, this start class will be available, and your project execution should start from here only. In this start class, we have one annotation. What is this annotation? Spring Boot application annotation. What is the purpose of this annotation? Is it mandatory annotation or is it optional annotation? It is mandatory annotation. What is the purpose of this annotation? This annotation making our start class as a configuration class, and this annotation making our start class to perform component scanning. This annotation enabling auto configuration. What is the component scanning? Identifying the classes which are represented as Spring Beans. Now, am I configuring the base package, or I no need to configure the base package? I no need to configure the base package. Then which one it will consider as a base package? In.Ashok IT will be considered as a base package. Now here I have a report service. Now let me create one more class with a name called report to DAO. This class I am creating inside DAO package. Now let me write a constructor, zero param constructor I am writing. Let me write one SOP statement, system.out.println. This is report to DAO constructor. Report DAO constructor. Now if I run my application, report service class object will be created or will not be created? Report service object will be created or will not be created? Report service object will be created. Why this object will be created? Because it is represented as a Spring Bean and this class available in the package, that package following the base package naming convention. What is the base package? In which package your start class is available, that package is called as a base package. Now in.ashok IT is the base package. In this project, any package which starts with in.ashok IT will participate in the component scanning. Are you getting my point? Yes. Application.java, I'm running this project. So here annotation is available, component scanning will happen, base package in.ashok IT. Any other class available in the package? Do we have any other class in the package? No. Then it will go for in.ashok IT.beans. Is it following the base package naming convention? Yes. So that package will participate in the component scanning. In that package, do I have any class? Yes. There is a class called report service. Report service is a normal Java class or it is a Spring Bean? It is a Spring Bean. How I am representing that as a Spring Bean? By using @service. So object will be created or object will not be created? Object will be created. Then it will go for a next package in.ashok IT.dao. Is it following the base package naming convention? Yes, it is following the base package naming convention. Then it will go to that package. Do I have any class in that package? Yes, report DAO. It will go to report DAO. Object will be created or will not be created? Will not be created. Object will not be created. Why? This class is not a Spring Bean. This class is a normal Java class. How to represent this class as a Spring Bean? How to represent this class Spring Bean? By using @repository. By using @repository. Now run this application. Right click, run as boot application. Now see, report, it is application failed. What is the problem? Earlier I ran my application, it is using some port number. If I run once again, it is not taking that. Run as boot application console. Now can you see, service object is created and DAO object is created. So with this, what is the conclusion? Springboot is performing auto configuration. It is performing component scanning. So now, who is creating the object? IOC. Am I creating the object? No. IOC creating the object. Am I starting the IOC? No. Who is starting the IOC? IOC is starting by Springboot start class. Are you clear? Start class is the entry point for boot application. Damn sure question. What is the start class in the Spring Boot? Start class is entry point for boot application execution. Start class is called as main class in the Spring Boot. When we create the boot application, start class will create by default. This is the syntax of the start class. Here we have one annotation. That one annotation is equal to 3 annotations. Boot to configuration, which is equal to configuration. Enable auto configuration @component scan. Are you clear with my point? Yes. Next one. Here we are having run method. So many things are happening inside the run method. Let us do postmortem on the run method to understand internals of the Spring Boot. How Spring Boot is working internally, how IOC container starting, which class it is using to start the IOC container. All the information we can understand by using that run method. Are you clear? Yes. Now I want to go inside the run method. This run method is my method or it is Spring application class method? Yes. Run is a static method. Run is a static method which is available in the Spring application class. So as it is a static method, we are calling class name dot method name. Class name dot method name. What is the return type of the run method? The run method return type is configurable application context. What is that configurable application context? That is the reference of the IOC container. Okay, configurable application context. Configurable application context is a interface or it is a class? Come on guys, it is a interface. So whenever I call the run method, observe, I am calling run method from the main method. Run is a predefined method available in the Spring application class. Run is a predefined method available in the Spring application class. This method is returning configurable application context object. Actually, it is a interface. So now, can IOC create the object for the interface and return the interface object? In the Java, can I create the object for the interface? No, we cannot create object for the interface. Then how it is giving the interface object? Here it is providing implementation class object for us. It is providing implementation class object for us. Now, can I see what is the implementation class name for this interface? Observe, apply your common sense. I'm calling the run method. It is giving configurable application context object. Configurable application context is an interface. Which class object is stored into the interface reference variable? I want that class name. How? How to get the implementation class name for that interface? Get bean. No. What is this variable, right? What is the data type of the variable? Interface. That means this variable holding what? Implementation class object. What is the name of that implementation class? How to find out that? Correct. Here I have a variable. That variable is belongs to interface. So here interface reference variable holding implementation class object. What is the name of that implementation class which is holding by that variable? I want to get that. System.out.println context dot get class dot get name. Context dot get class dot get name. What is the meaning of get class dot get name? Which class name? This object is holding, this variable is holding some object, right? That object is belongs to which class? Now run this. Run as boot application. Run as remove this. Stop. My server is already running. That's why it is failing again. Run as boot application. What is the class name? What is the name of the class? Annotation config servlet web server application context. That class is used by the run method to create the object for IOC container and it returned that object. No, you hold on. So first read that class name. Annotation config servlet web server application context. Who used that class? Who is creating IOC simple? In the Spring, I created IOC container, man. How I created IOC container in the Spring? Application context. Context is equal to new class path XML application context. So what is the meaning of this? What is the meaning of this? This is the implementation class for this interface. Interface reference variable holding implementation class object. Why I am creating object for this class? Why I am creating object for this class? To create the object for the IOC container. That class is used to start the IOC container. When you create the object for this class, IOC container will start. That is one approach. Do I have any other approach to start the IOC container? What is the another approach? What is the another approach I have? Annotation config application context. So this is another implementation class which is used to start IOC container. Are you clear? So here application context is a interface. Can I create the object for the interface? We cannot create the object for the interface. We need to create the object for interface implementation class. Interface reference variable can hold implementation class object. Here I am creating object for class path XML application context. When I create the object for class path XML application context, IOC container will start based on the given now. I am creating the IOC container. But when you go for Springboot, am I creating the IOC container or I am not creating the IOC container? Springboot is creating the IOC container. Now I want to understand Springboot is using this class to create the IOC container? No. Is it using this class to create the IOC container? No. Which class it is using? It is using another class called annotation config servlet web server application context. So this is the name of the class which is used by Springboot to start our IOC container. How I am able to identify that? I am calling the run method. What that run method is returning? Configurable application context. What is the configurable application context? Interface. So interface reference variable will hold some class object. What is the name of that class? Variable dot get class dot get name. I'm able to get the class name. Now tell me which class is used by IOC, which class is used by Springboot to start the IOC container? Annotation config servlet web server application context. Are you clear? Now, but here there is a small concept. Always Springboot will not use this class. Always Springboot will not use this class to create the object for the IOC. When it will use this class to create the object, if you add web starter in the pom.xml. What is the starter available? Web starter is available. Whenever you add the web starter, then it will use this class to create object for the IOC container. For example, I don't want to develop a web application. I want to develop only standalone project. Then I will remove web starter. I will keep a normal starter. I will remove the web starter and the security starter. Nothing is required. I have the basic Springboot starter. Okay. Now, see, stop this. I have removed web starter. When I remove the web starter, server will come or server will not come. Server will come or server will not come. Check it. Run as boot application. Application started. Server is coming or server is not coming. Now, which class it is using to start the IOC? So Springboot always using same class to start the IOC, or it is changing the class name? It is changing the class name. Whenever you create a project by using only boot starter, Boot starter means it is used to develop standalone application. Whenever we add boot starter, IOC is creating by using a class called annotation config application context. Are you clear with my point? Yes. Now, how IOC container created by Springboot? How IOC created in Springboot? Programmer is creating or Springboot is creating? Springboot is creating. Where is the logic to create the IOC container? Come on, guys. Am I writing that logic? That logic is already available. Already available. Spring application dot run method. Spring application dot run method contains a logic to start IOC container. How IOC started? How IOC starting in Springboot? Spring application dot run method contains logic to start IOC container. Now here, guys, if you add just to boot starter, if I add just to boot starter, what is happening? Which class IOC is used? Which class is used to create IOC? Annotation config application context. These all are the internals. If you understand the internals, then only you can develop the project. You need to concentrate. You need to concentrate. Everything I will prove practically. Whatever I am explaining, I will prove that. Now, here I am running my application. IOC container started. And IOC container reference is returned by the run method that I am storing into a variable. Okay. Now my question is, which class it used to start the IOC? Okay. If you have just to boot starter, it is using annotation config application context class to start the IOC container. For example, if I change the starter from boot starter to boot starter web, what is the meaning of web starter? I can create a web application. To develop the web application, we will go for web starter. I have added boot starter web dependency. Now run my application and see the class name. Run as boot application, and the class name is same or the class name is changed. Class name is changed. Now here I have added web starter. When I add the web starter, this is the class name it is using to start the IOC container. In the Spring framework, who is responsible to start the IOC? Programmer. How many ways we can start? Bean factory application context. Now here it is using annotation config application context to start the IOC when you have only boot starter. When you have web starter, it is using annotation config servlet web server application context class to start the IOC container. Suppose I want to develop reactive application, not React.js. Reactive is different. That is event-based application. To develop event-driven application in the Spring, there is a starter called WebFlux starter is available. Now I am adding WebFlux starter in my form.xml. Okay. So this is used to develop reactive applications, right? What is the starter I have added? WebFlux. 3 types of application. To develop a normal standalone application, we will go for boot starter. To develop web applications and REST APIs, we will go for web starter. If you want to develop a reactive application, sir, what is reactive? We will understand in the future. It is used to develop event-driven applications. It is used to develop event-driven application. This concept introduced in the Spring 5.x version, Spring WebFlux. It is used to develop event-driven application. Now I am using WebFlux starter. When I use the WebFlux starter, run my application, run as a boot app, check it. Is it using the same class to start the IOC, or it is using a different class to start the IOC? Different class. What is the name of the class? Annotation config reactive web server application context. So here, if you create a simple standalone Spring Boot application, this class will be used to create the IOC container. If you want to create a web application, then Spring Boot will use this class to start the IOC container. If you add WebFlux dependency, it will use this class to create the IOC container. Programmer should create the IOC. Programmer should start the IOC. Boot will start the IOC. Boot will start the IOC. In the interview, if anybody asks you how IOC starting in the Spring Boot, you need to explain these three concepts. In the Spring Boot, we no need to start the IOC container. That will be started as part of run method. How run method will start the IOC? Run method will check what dependency we added in the pom.xml. If you add web starter, then this class will be used to create the IOC. If you add WebFlux starter, this class will be used to start the IOC. If you add only boot starter, this class will be used to start the IOC. For example, if I add both WebFlux and web, now in my pom.xml, WebFlux dependency is available and I'm adding web dependency also. Are you guys clear with my point? I'm adding web starter as well as I'm adding WebFlux starter. What is the purpose of web starter and WebFlux starter? What is the purpose of web starter and WebFlux starter? Web starter is used to develop the web application. WebFlux starter is used to develop the reactive application. Now, I am having both starters in the pom.xml and I am trying to run my application. Got it? Right click, run as boot application. Go to the console and check it. Now, which class it used to start IOC? When you add web and WebFlux, priority will be given to web starter. Are you getting my point? If you add all the three starters, the priority will be given to web starter. This class will be used to start the IOC container. Who is starting IOC container? Am I creating IOC container or Spring Boot is creating the IOC? Spring Boot is creating the IOC. Where is the logic to start the IOC? Inside the run method. The logic is available inside the run method. Fine, good. So first, one thing we understood about run method. What is the return type of the run method? Configurable application context. It is holding IOC container object. Which class it is using to start the IOC depends upon the starter you add in the pom.xml. If you add just to boot starter for standalone, this class will be used to start IOC. If you add web starter, this class will be used to start IOC. If you add WebFlux starter, this class will be used to start the IOC. If I add both web starter and WebFlux starter, this class will be used to start the IOC container. How I am able to identify run method is using which class to start the IOC? I got the reference.getClass.getName. What it is printing? The name of the class, which is the name of the class, which is holding by this variable. This is an interface variable that is holding IOC object. That IOC object belongs to which class? I'm getting by using getClass.getName. Are you guys clear with my point? Yes. Next one. Observe, whenever we run this application, you can see one logo is printing on the console. Can you see? One logo is printing on the console. Yes or no? That logo is called as banner in the Spring Boot. What is that called? Banner in the Spring Boot. Whenever we run Spring Boot application, banner will be printed on the console. Here we have an option to disable the banner, or we can customize the banner also. Are you clear with my point? Right. How to disable the banner? Let me write. What is banner in the Spring Boot? what is banner in Springboot. When we run the boot application, Spring logo will be printed on the console. That Spring logo is called as banner. Spring logo which is printing on console. Spring logo which is printing on console is called as banner. We have below 3 modes for banner. First one is console mode, second one is log mode, and third one is off mode. Right? We have 3 modes for the banner. What are the 3 modes? One is console mode, second one is log mode, third one is off mode. If I don't specify any mode for the banner, what is the default mode? Console. What is the meaning of that? What is the meaning of that? Banner will be printed on the console, right? I'm running my boot application. Whether it is a standalone application or web application, that doesn't matter. Banner will be printed. I'm removing web and web plugs. So now it is a standalone project. Server will not be available. Now let me run this project, run as a boot application. When I run this as a boot application, can you see the banner is printed? Yes. So what is the banner in the Spring Boot? Spring logo, which is printing on console, is called as banner. We have 3 modes for the banner. What are the 3 modes? Console mode available, log mode available, off mode is available. What is the default mode of the banner? The default mode for the banner is console. That means banner text will be printed on the console. Suppose I don't want to print the banner. I don't want to print that banner. Then I go for spring dot banner dot mode. Spring dot banner dot mode. Banner dot mode will be available. Main dot banner, spring dot main dot banner mode is equal to off. So now if you see control space, how many modes available? 3 modes are available. What are the 3 modes we are seeing now? Console, log, off. What is the console? Default. Banner text will be printed on the console. If I give the mode is equal to log, what is the meaning of that? It will print on the log file. But currently, do we have the logging in the project? No. So in the project batch, we will see what is the logging. If you keep mode is equal to log, your banner will be printed on the log file. Suppose if I go for off, what is the meaning of off? I don't want to print the banner. I don't want to print the banner for my application. Okay. Spring Boot starter Lombok. Yep. Let me update the project. Maven. Update the project. Force update. Yeah, fine. Now let me run this application boot app. Banner is printing or is not printing? Not printing. Why the banner is not printing? Because the mode of the banner is the off. Okay, remove this. Remove this. Now I want to run my application. Run as a boot app. Now banner is printing or not? Printing. Now I don't want this logo. I want to keep my company name as a banner, or I want to keep my project name as a banner. For this, in the project resources folder, create a file with a name called banner.txt. What is the file I have created? Banner.txt. Go to browser. Here, generate ASCII characters. Generate ASCII art. Now go to this generate ASCII art. There is a website. Here, whatever text you want, you can type it. I'm typing it as Ashok IT. So this is in the ASCII text. Let me copy this text and let me keep in the banner.txt. Whatever the text that you want to print as a banner, you take that text from the ASCII generator, you keep that text in the banner.txt file. Now run your application. Run as boot app. Now what it is printing? Our company name is printing as a banner text. So in the real time, people will keep their company name as a banner text, or they will keep their project name as a banner text. Can I customize the banner text? How can we customize the banner text? By creating banner.txt file, right? So you can keep any content. If you keep a normal text will come. If you keep ASCII text will come. Getting my point? Yes. We can customize banner text in Springboot by creating banner.txt file under src main resources. Under src main resources, that is the default name. Whenever you create a file with a name called banner.txt, Springboot will load that file. Sir, where is the logic to load that file? Everything in the run method only. So creating the IOC container, printing the banner, loading the banner text, everything is part of the run method. Are you clear with the banner? Yes. What is the banner? The logo that is printing on the console, that is called banner. What are the modes available for the banner? There are 3 modes available for the banner. The modes console, off, and log. What is the console? Default mode prints on the console. Prints on the console. What is the meaning of log? What is the meaning of log, guys? Prints on log file. It will print the banner on the log file. What is the off? Don't print a banner. Don't print banner. Can I customize the banner? Yes, I can customize the banner. How to customize the banner? By creating banner.txt file. So now, what is the URL I am using to generate the ASCII text? So this is the URL which I am using to generate the ASCII text. Suppose if you want to keep your project name. For example, I am working on SBI API. Okay, that SBI API name I want to print as a banner. So you can generate that text and you can keep that text. ASCII URL. ASCII text generation URL. You can go to this URL and you can give the text. Whatever the text you give, with that banner text will be generated. You copy that into your banner.txt file. Springboot will load the text from the banner.txt file. If I change the file name, will it load that? If I change the file name, will it load that? No, that file name is a predefined file name. Perfect. Good. With these 2 concepts we understood regarding run method. Whenever our boot application is executed, that boot application execution will start from the main method. Inside the main method, we are calling the run method. What that run method is doing? It is returning the reference of the IOC container. How it is starting the IOC container? Which class it is using to start the IOC container depends upon the starter we have added. If I add web starter, this class. If I add webflux starter, this class. If I add boot starter, this class, it will use to start the IOC. Along with the IOC, that run method is printing banner also. Can I stop the banner? How to stop the banner? Now here we can set banner mode in application.properties file. We can set banner mode in the application.properties file. Go to this properties file. Banner.main.mode is equal to off. That means banner will not be printed. So if I don't set any mode for the banner, what is the default mode? Console. That's why that banner is printing on the console. Okay. All of you able to understand as of now? Any questions, anybody? What is the Spring Boot? When the concepts are increasing, when we are moving forward, don't forget the previous concepts. The Spring Boot definition is very important. If anybody asks you what is the Spring Boot, you should be able to explain at least to 10 to 15 minutes. What is the Spring Boot? What are the advantages of the Spring Boot? How to create the Spring Boot application? How Spring Boot application execution will happen? What is the start class in the Spring Boot? What is the boot application annotation? What is the main method in the Spring Boot? What is the run method in the Spring Boot? What is happening inside the run method? Everything you should be able to answer, right? Yes. Now, let's go and see internals of the run method. Let us see internals of the run method. Run method is our method or it is a predefined method? Run method is a predefined method. In which class that method is available? That method is available in the Spring application class. Can I call it as a static method? How can I say static? That method is getting called by using class name. That method is getting called by using class name. So that's why that method is called as a static method. 1 minute, guys. Yes, fine. Now I want to go inside this run method. I want to go inside this run method. Just I am pressing the control button and I am clicking on this method name. I'm pressing the control button. I'm clicking on the method name. Right. What happened now? I am opening predefined class. I'm opening predefined class. So what is the predefined class? Spring application class. Which class I opened now? Spring application class. From which version it is available? From 1.0 it is available. Are you clear? Good. So now let me press control. I'm in the keyboard. I'm pressing control button. I'm clicking on this method. Why? To see the dot class file, to see the source code of that method. Go inside the run method. When I go inside the run method, can you see return type of the run method? What is the return type of the run method? Configurable application context. Internally, it is calling one more run method. My start class is calling one run method. My start class is calling one run method. Internally, it is calling another run method. Can I go inside this run method? Yes. Now that method is available here. That method is available here. Now here in this method, what is happening? Can you see? What is this? Spring application class object is created. Using that object, they are calling the run method. Can I say this is a constructor? Can I go inside the constructor? Yes, I'm going inside the constructor. Then again, they are calling this. Again, they are calling a constructor. In this constructor, there is some logic available. In that logic, if you see, there is a method called deduce from class path. What is the method name? Deduce from class path. Go inside this method. Here is the logic to identify which class they have to use to start the IOC container. If you have WebFlux starter, then use one class to create the IOC. If you use web starter, use one class to start the IOC. If you don't use web starter or WebFlux starter, then use this class to start the IOC. Where is that logic available? Deduce from the class path. It is used to identify what type of application we have created. Is it a standalone application? Is it a web application? Or is it a reactive application? So here, if your pom.xml contains boot starter, it will consider as normal standalone application. Then it will use this class to start the IOC. The application type they are identifying. Where is that logic available? That logic available in the Spring application class constructor. In the Spring application class constructor, that logic available, application type dot deduce from class path. Deduce from class path method available in the which class? Web application type dot class. What they are doing? What they are doing? Class utils dot is present. Web flux indicator. Class utils dot present. Servlet indicator or normal application. So this logic they are using in the web application type class deduce from class path. So Spring application class constructor will identify what type of project we have created. Is it a web application, or is it a reactive application, or is it a normal application? That will be identified by Spring class constructor. What is this Spring class? Spring application class. My class or boot class? It is a boot class. Now go here. I'm calling run method. Spring application dot run method. When I go inside the run method, it is calling another run method. Here it is calling the constructor of the Spring application. Finally, it is calling this run method. By the time it calls the actual run method, it already identified what type of project we have created. Is it a standalone? Is it a web? Is it a reactive? They identified the type of the application. Now go to this run method. This is the logic which is executing in the run method. Now here there is a method called print banner. Right? What is the meaning of a print banner? What is the meaning of print banner? That banner is printing on the console. Then what is this line? Create application context. What is the meaning of create application context? IOC container will be created. Which class it will use to create the IOC? Based on the starter. Based on the starter. Where is that logic available? IOC creation. Who is creating the IOC, man? Who is creating the IOC container? Run method is creating the IOC container. Who is printing the banner? Run method is printing the banner. Now, can you see the run method code? Do I need to buttify? Do we need to buttify this? Do we need to write this? No, we are just understanding what is happening inside. How run method is getting executed. Just read these lines just one time. Just read from top to bottom what is happening there. This is what is happening when you run your boot application. This run method will be executed in the background. Read that code. Read that code. Come on, guys. I have given time for you to read this, not to talk with your friends. You need to read it and you need to tell me what is happening here. It is a normal Java code only. It is not a rocket science. You need to read that and you need to tell me what is happening inside the run method. Naveen, you have to explain. Read that. Online students, please see and observe what is happening inside the run method. First, understand what is happening inside the run method. Can anybody tell me what is happening inside the run method? Huh. Okay. Right. Fine. Guys, see here. Inside this, whenever our application is started, that means main method is getting started. This is called start class of our Springboot. This is the entry point for boot application execution. Inside this start class, we are having a main method. Inside the main method, we are calling the run method. Run is a predefined method. So if we go and see inside this run method, lot of logic is available. So we no need to butify this logic. We no need to write this logic in the project. It is just for our knowledge. What is happening inside the run method? Now, inside this run method, first here they are taking start time of this method. At what time this method is started? They are noting down that system.nano time, at what time this method execution started. Then they are creating bootstrap context. Create bootstrap context, nothing but they are loading the initializers which are required to run our boot application. In the boot, auto configuration is available. That means Spring Boot people developed several classes to provide configuration required for the project. Those are called as initializer classes, and some listener classes are available. When our application is starting, run method is going to load that bootstrap context, and it will load the initializer classes which are required to run our boot application. After loading that bootstrap context, it is going to load the listeners which are required for our application. Listener means when some action performed, it will listen to that event, it will perform some other operation. Suppose if application started, start the Tomcat server. That is one listener. When the application started, create the connection pool. That is one listener. When the application started, generate a password for security. That is a listener, right? So like this, there are several initializer classes are available and several listeners are available. Those initializer classes and listener classes are starting by our run method. After that, there is a method called prepare environment. Prepare environment means whatever the properties we are configuring in the application.properties file, here we can configure server port number, database credentials, database username password, our security credentials. Yesterday I configured server port number, security credential. Whenever we configure the properties, then prepare environment method will load the properties from the application.properties file. That is called prepare environment. So once it has done that prepare environment, then it will go for configure ignore bean. Whatever the beans that are not required, it is going to ignore them. Then finally 303, what it is doing? In the 303, what it is doing? Printing the banner. That banner text will be printed on the console. Now print banner. In the print banner, if mode is off, then that means it will not print any banner. So here, if you create the banner.txt, it will load our banner. Otherwise, it will print the default banner. If the mode is locked, if the mode is off, nothing will be printed. If the mode is locked, it will print on the log file. If not locked, then what it will do? It will print on the system.out. What is the meaning of system.out? Console. If the mode is not specified, then it will print the banner on the console. If you set the mode as log, it will print on the log file. Here, if you set the mode as off, banner will not be printed. So who is calling this print banner method? Our run method. After this banner printing is completed, then it is going to create the IOC container. What is the method? Create application context. Which class it will use to create the IOC container? Yes, it depends upon the starter we have in the pom.xml. Then here, once it is started, prepare the context. That means whatever the listeners we have loaded, whatever the initializers we have loaded, prepare our IOC container with all the objects which has to be created. Prepare the context, refresh the context. After IOC container creation is completed, then it is calling duration of nanos, system.nano time minus start time. What is the current time and when this method started? End time minus start time, total time taken to print banner to start the IOC. That time it is going to print on the console. If you see the console of our Springboot application run as boot application, it will print a time on the console. Now starting the application, what is this? 0.58 seconds it has taken to start the application. How they identified that time? In the run method starting point, they kept the start time. Once IOC container started, they kept the end time. Now here they are calculating current time minus start time. End time minus start time, it will give the total time that it has taken to start the IOC container. Once IOC container completed, starting is completed, they are calling some listeners and they are calling some runners. There is a concept called runner. So here, once IOC container started, they are starting some listeners and they are calling some runners. Once all these things are completed, they are finally returning the context. What is that context? IOC container reference. So here we need to understand what is runner. What is this? Runner. Runner is used to execute any functionality only once when the IOC container creation completed. Are you getting my point? So I have a requirement. When my project is started, I want to send an email to project manager saying that application started. How many times I will send that mail? Only one time. Any logic that you want to execute only one time when your project is started. That's it. Then you will go for runner. Can you tell me what is runner? Any logic that you want to execute only one time when my application started, then I will go for runner. In the Springboot, there are two types of runners available. Call runners. What are the runners available? One is the application runner, another one is the command line runner. Simple example, when my project is started, I want to get the static tables data from the database. I want to store into cache. How many times I will load the data from how many times I will load static data from the database? For every request or only one time? Only one time. For that, can I go for runner? Can I go for runner? Yes. What is a runner in the Springboot? Runner is used to execute the logic only one time when our application started. How many types of runners are there? There are two types of runners are available. What are those runners? One is application runner. Second one is the command line runner. In the tomorrow session, we will see how to work with the runner concept, and I will give you some real-time use cases where we will use a runner in our projects. Getting my point? Yes. So do you understand what is this run method? Now tell me, can I run boot application without calling the run method? It will execute like a normal Java main method. There is no use. So if I call the run method, what is the benefit? It is preparing the environment. It is starting the listeners. It is starting the initializers. It is printing the banner. It is creating the IOC container, and it is calling the runners. Finally, it is returning the IOC container. So what is the return type of the run method? Configurable application context. It is holding the reference of the IOC container. Now, what is this annotation? Springboot application annotation. That annotation is equal to 300. Just 2 lines of code. @Springboot application, Spring application dot run method. But lot of story we need to understand internally. How this annotation is working, how this run method is working. So every Java programmer should know about Springboot start class, because that is the entry point for the boot application. Most of our work reduced by this run method and that annotation. Now if I remove this annotation, if I remove this run method, now is it going to execute like a boot application? No, it will execute like a normal Java main method. Suppose if I use only run method without the annotation, component scanning will not happen. Why we need component scanning? To identify which classes are represented as Spring Bean classes, right? So this annotation is mandatory, and calling this run method is also mandatory. So tomorrow we will talk about runners in the Springboot. Okay? Any questions, anyone? Anybody having any questions? Online students, can you type your question? No questions, huh? Okay, very good. Fine, guys, thank you. With this, I'm stopping for today. We'll meet in the tomorrow's class. Okay. Yep. So tomorrow we'll take care of that, sir.